We're at Davis Live in Jerusalem. Thank you. Let's discuss this more with Dr. Nimrod Goren, who is president of the Mitvim Institute and executive board member of Diplomeds. Thank you very much for joining us on BBC News. President Trump says there's no guarantees the ceasefire will hold. What are you hoping for from this meeting between Prime Minister Netanyahu and the president?
Over the last 2 weeks or so, Israelis and Palestinians in Gaza have been enjoying the benefits of having a ceasefire. Every Saturday we are seeing hostages that have been kept by Hamas for over a year come back home, telling the stories of how difficult it was over there, and so many are still there. So I think the biggest hope is for the meeting between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu to pave the way to continuation of the ceasefire beyond the first 42 days. But there are quite a bit of question marks whether both of the leaders are committed, as they say, to actually moving from phase 1 to phase 2.
And we always heard from experts that phase 2 is going to be one of the hardest phases of this deal.
Indeed, because from the negotiations for this ceasefire has been going on for a year. The Biden administration invested a lot of efforts, and time after time we saw that at least when it comes to our Prime Minister in Israel, Netanyahu, he seems to be willing to a first humanitarian phase of some IDF Israeli military deployment, but also some hostage release. But going beyond that to actually ending the war and going for full Israeli withdrawal from the Gaza Strip, which is a price that most Israelis are willing to pay for the release of all hostages, is not within Netanyahu's calculations. It's not within the goals of some of his far-right coalition partners. And then what happened just before President Trump came into office was that pressure was put by the incoming president to make the first phase happen. The question is now whether that's the big enough win for Trump to show that he delivered something that Biden couldn't, or whether we'll push in the same intensity for the next phase to happen. Because if it will be only to Netanyahu and his coalition partners, I'm not sure they will be going for the second phase.
I'm interested about something else that is happening in the United States. The Trump administration reportedly intending to merge the US government's main overseas agency, the aid agency USAID, with the State Department. Do you think that could have an impact in the Middle East and in particular in Gaza?
I think what is happening to USAID over the last few days is devastating for those Israelis and Palestinians who are looking for a way to work together on a civil society level to advance a two-state solution. We are hoping to transition from this terrible conflict into peacemaking. Doing so requires a lot of resources. USAID has been a major funder of people-to-people activities between Israelis and Palestinians taking place in a very difficult reality. And now when this funding is stopped, at least for the first 90 days, but maybe later on, if USAID does not continue to operate as it is now, that will have a devastating effect on the power of people on the ground to actually transform the reality into one of peacemaking. The US had a major role to play in that in previous years and decades. It should continue that and continue USAID funding for peace NGOs.
Dr. Goren, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it here on BBC News. And